think about this. There are times in your life where something happens and you just have to ask questions, all right? Something happens, you just have to ask questions. I want to tell you a story that my hunch is that you're not familiar with because it happened about 9 years ago, and I'm going to guess that you weren't watching the news 9 years ago. Probably not, right? Maybe some of my adults know this story. Or if you binge everything on Netflix, you may have come across this as well. But there's a story, a true story, about something that happened 9 years ago, 2014, March 8th on 2014. There was an airplane that disappeared. You've heard of this, right? And so it was a flight that was a part of Malaysian Airlines, and it took off at Kuala Lumpur in Asia, and it was flying to Beijing. And about 38 minutes into the flight, the plane disappeared. And no one has found it since. In fact, I want to show you a map of like what was supposed to happen, right? And so if you look at this, it's bigger up there. Flying from Malaysia, it flew in the middle of the night. It was supposed to arrive in Beijing first thing in the morning. And what happened was this plane, as it took off from Malaysia and it went into the South China Sea, it just disappeared. Everything on the radar, everything that tracks a plane as it was crossing different air traffic controllers from Malaysian airspace into Vietnam airspace, it just disappeared. And so it didn't show up in Beijing, big surprise, but they had no idea where this plane was. And so people started asking questions like, how does a Boeing 777 just disappear? That doesn't happen, right? Planes do not disappear out of the sky. And so they did all this like looking for answers and trying to find different stuff. Well, eventually they found out that this plane, as it left Malaysia, it eventually left and it came back across and then went straight down into the Indian Ocean. And when it ran out of fuel, it crashed. Or at least that's what they think happened. But the problem is no one has found the plane. They think they found parts of the plane, but they can't really actually be sure. And so there's all these different theories about what actually happened. But it's actually a bizarre thing. It's a mystery that's never really been solved. What happened? So a lot of people blame the pilot. They blame like it just blew up or whatever, but no one really knows. And I found that story interesting because as I like looked into this, there's so many places that people look for answers. So many different theories, so many different possibilities of what could have happened to this plane. And everybody was just trying to piece together all these different things, trying to figure out what happened. Sometimes in life, you're going to find yourself in a place where you're just looking for answers, where something happens or you're presented with a situation and you just need answers. You need help. You don't know where to turn. Maybe you're looking for a solution. You're looking for advice. And here's why that's important. Where you get those answers is really important. And if you don't start paying attention to where you find your answers, what you're Googling or all those type of things, you could find yourself in a different place than you want to be based on what you find. We're going to continue our series tonight about the kings of Israel as we've walked through different parts of the Old Testament, looking at them. And tonight we're going to talk to you about this idea of looking for answers and decision-making based on the story of Rehoboam. Now, I know what 95% of you are thinking right now, like, who is Rehoboam? I don't know. I didn't pay attention at that point of Sunday school. That wasn't one of the stories that we put up on the screen or anything like that. But Rehoboam is a central part of the Old Testament. His decisions changed everything. So let me back up just to make sure, in case you haven't been here in a couple weeks, where we've been. We started by looking at the very first king of Israel, Saul, and we looked at him as the first king. And then we looked at David as the greatest king, right? He was the greatest king in Israel's history. And then last week, Spencer talked to you about Solomon's story as the wisest person or the wisest king that we had, right? And so those are all linear. Saul, and he died. They appointed David. David died. Solomon was his son. Solomon took over. Next up in line is Rehoboam. Rehoboam is actually Solomon's son. And so this follows in order. What gets interesting here is things take a big turn in the story, and it happens with Rehoboam. Remember last week, Spencer talked to you about Solomon. One of the things that he mentioned was, I don't know if you caught this or not, but Solomon had 700 wives. Just, can you put that in your head for a second, like what that actually means? Imagine having 700 wives and trying to be a good dad, okay? Like, not easy. But this was the task that he faced, and let me tell you, he failed a little bit because he did not prepare Rehoboam very well to take over the kingship. Rehoboam was ill-prepared to take over from the wisest king that we had in Solomon. And so his interests were divided with all these women and all this wealth and all this type of stuff that he did not prepare Rehoboam well. And so you fast forward, Solomon dies, Rehoboam is now king. Is everybody following along? Because I want you to understand where we've been at. At one point in Solomon's life, there was a man named Jeroboam. It's not Rehoboam, it's Jeroboam, who had kind of challenged and wanted to be king as well, and Solomon had sent him away. He said, you need to leave, go away. So he kind of banished him for a while. Well, now that Solomon dies, Rehoboam has come back, and this is the beginning of Rehoboam's story, because Jeroboam brings all the people together, and they come to Rehoboam with a request. Look at these words, 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4. This is Jeroboam speaking. He says, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. So this is Jeroboam on behalf of the entire nation of Israel, saying, listen, Solomon, how do you think he got all his splendor? He was not only the wisest, but he was the richest, okay? So he had all this money and all this wealth. How do you think he got it? Well, we had to work for it. And so the yoke, it was heavy. We had to do all this labor. Please, Rehoboam, as you take over and as your king, lighten the burden. Ease up a little bit. Take it easy on us, right? And if you do, we'll serve you. And so that's their request to Rehoboam, this young king, as he takes over. Probably in the first week that he takes over, this is happening. And so he has a choice, but the problem is he doesn't know what to do. You want to know how I know that? It's because the very next verse. This is what Rehoboam says. He says, Rehoboam answered, go away for 3 days and then come back to me. And so the people went away. It's interesting because Rehoboam's just like, can you just give me some time to figure this out? I don't know the answer, which I think is okay. It's okay sometimes to say, I don't know the answer. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right choice is. Give me some time to figure this out. And so that's exactly what he says, and that's what they do. And so what he does next is so interesting, is so fascinating, and actually changes history. And this is what we're going to learn from tonight. Here's why this is important. You'll find yourself in situations in life exactly like this, where you need to give an answer, you need to have an answer, you need to make a decision, and you don't know what to do. You don't know what the right answer is, you don't know what the right choice is, and what you do at that point is important, and it will help you make your next decision. If you got something in front of me and I don't know what to do, where you look for answers is important. Now, we look for answers all kinds of different things, right? The answer to this, I don't want you to think this is just about kingship or this is just about some big decision. It could be everything. It could be looking for the answer on where to go to school, looking for answers on how do I do my promposal. It could be how to fold a fitted sheet. Has anybody figured that out yet? That's a joke, sorry. What to do with the rest of my... Have you tried to fold a fitted sheet before? It's impossible. My wife does it. All right. Decisions, like, what do I... I've lost track now. What should I do? And so here's the question, all right? Let me get us back on track. Here's the question. What do I do when I need help? Think about this in your life. When you need advice, when you need to make a decision, when you need to find the answer, what do you do? Where do you look? Where do you go to? Because the answer to this question is actually going to dictate what happens for the rest of your life. Some of us look in really, really poor places for our answers. And this is what I want to talk to us about tonight. Rehoboam is faced with this dilemma, and so he starts off with some really good intentions where he says, give me some time to figure it out. I'm going to read to you the rest of his story, then we're going to talk about this from a very practical standpoint, okay? So this is 1 Kings chapter 12. This is the rest of the story. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served with his father Solomon during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer these people, he asked. They replied, well, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted with the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, what is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, lighten the yoke your father put on us? The young men who had grown up with him replied, These people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter. Now tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. That sounds really, really mean, but you could see the problem here, right? Rehoboam at first does something really wise. He seeks the advice of elder counsel, people who had experience, maybe people who are wise. But then he fumbles the bag. He ignores it. And he chats with his friends and he takes their advice, right? So here's what I want you at least to remember this part, because this part is significant, and as we move through the rest of the summer, you will see this play out. The consequences of this decision, when Rehoboam goes back and tells these people, I'm going to make the yoke heavier, I'm not going to lighten it, the kingdom splits in two. And so now, what was once one kingdom of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, is now split into two. It's a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. It's Judah in the south and Israel in the north. It's 10 tribes and 2 tribes. It doesn't play out in the very next few verses, but that's exactly what happens in Rehoboam's lifetime. The kingdom splits in two. The north starts to follow Jeroboam, and then there's 2 tribes left that follow Rehoboam. And so for the rest of history, of Israel's history, they are 2 kingdoms. They are never one united kingdom again. And specifically for the northern kingdom, from this day forward, they never had a king who was good and obeyed the Lord. For over 200 years, until they were captured by Assyria in 722 before Jesus came, 722 years before Jesus came, they never had a king that followed the Lord and obeyed him. That was the consequence. Now, the southern kingdom, Rehoboam's kingdom, they had some good kings and some bad kings, but they eventually were captured as well. So that's the story. That's the story of Rehoboam, the decision that he made that was before him, the choice that he made, and the consequence that happened. So let me make this practical, because that's like, man, that's history book. I don't know if you knew that story or not, but now you do. I want to make this very practical and go back to this. What do I do when I need help? Where do I go when I need advice? And I came up with at least 3 main ideas of where I look, and I'm guessing where you look as well, of what do we do when we need help, when we need advice, when we need to make a decision. And I want to talk to you about those and some things that we need to think about, all right? So when you are looking for an answer, where do you go? Here's the first one, online. Advice from online, right? I don't have to convince you of this, right? This is what we do. We Google it, we YouTube it, we ask someone on social media their thoughts. Online has become our number one answer. Here's what I found. Google gets 900 billion views every month. I said that wrong. 90 billion views. That's still big, right? That means every single day, billions of people are logging on and Googling something looking for an answer, right? We all know how this works. We look for answers online. Sometimes we're finding answers online for things that we're not even asking, right? If you scroll through a reel or a TikTok or anybody on Threads yet? That's the new thing, right? We're finding answers. You guys are like, wake up, let's go, right? We find answers to questions that we're not even asking sometimes by just scrolling through and seeing things. The question is what kind of filter do we have to know whether the things that we find online are actually good advice or not? I want you to look at these words from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. It says this, test everything. Keep what is good and stay away from everything that is evil. The important thing for you in this day and age that we all live in is recognize that everything is available to you on your phone. Every answer that you're looking for, or an answer to every question, an answer to every question that you're asking can be found at your fingertips by a podcast or a blog or a YouTuber or a social influencer or somebody online that's providing that for you. The question is what you are receiving, is it good? Is it biblical? Is it the right advice? And so the encouragement that I want you to have is to test it, to know whether this is the right answer for you or not. Let me give you an example. If I left tonight and I went out in the parking lot and my truck doesn't start, I am not going to get on the phone and call my mom, right? You probably wouldn't either if your car didn't start. You say, Mom, I don't know what to do. Who would you call? Dad, probably, right? That's where I would start, maybe. Why? It's not that my mom doesn't love me. It's that if my mom's car doesn't start, who's she calling? My dad, right? And so if I'm going to need help or advice from someone how to fix a problem or to know what to do, I need to call or ask someone who knows the right answer or can help me find the right answer. And I know if I go out there and my car doesn't start, my mom isn't going to say, well, you need to pop the hood and you need to check that. My mom is going to say, I don't know, like call your dad, right? And so I'm going to someone who has experience or who has some knowledge in the situation. And that's a silly example, but that has to be true in how we operate in all these things. The problem is that sometimes we go online and we find the answers and the advice that we're looking for from people who shouldn't be giving you the answers, the advice for the problems that you're facing. And that's what we all have to recognize. Not all counsel is good counsel. It's very similar to the next thing that I came up with is people. Advice from people. We all do this, right? Who are the people in your life that are giving you answers? This is important because wise people, approaching wise people about the answers to your questions is important. And here's where I find this. In Proverbs chapter 13, this is what we read. Be friends with those who are wise, and you will become wise. Choose fools to be your friends, and you'll have trouble. Now, I get it. Some of you read this, and you're like, none of my friends are wise, right? Like, what do I do? They're all fools. And that's not necessarily true, but you should be choosing friends based on not based on like the wisdom that they can give you. But here's one of the things I came across within this last year. I know I've heard it before, but someone really spoke it into me. And he says this, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. You ever heard that before? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so who you are around, who you spend time with, and specifically who you go to for wisdom or counsel is important. All the questions that you have in your life, maybe some your friends can answer, but some answers to the questions that you're asking shouldn't come from your friends. They should come from wise counsel. For Rehoboam, he clearly had some unwise friends because they gave him bad advice that resulted in the people revolting against him, and it split the kingdom. The challenge for you is to make sure that the people in your life that have influence over your mind and your heart and your decision-making process are going to be looking out for you and what is best for you, all right? So let me give you the last one. So beyond online and the people in your life, this last one's a little bit different, but it's advice from yourself. I don't know, that's kind of a weird way to think about it. It's weird to even say out loud. We have so many decisions in our life that we make without consulting anyone. This is good on a lot of levels because it means that you're growing up, you're becoming an adult, you can make your own decisions, you can choose what to wear, you could choose all different types of stuff for yourself, and those things are good on most levels, right? But just in case you're curious, as we've talked about this, here's the definition of wisdom, especially going back to that last verse. That's not on the screen, sorry. Wisdom is this, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Wisdom, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And I just wonder, because I know it's true for myself, in some areas in my life, I don't qualify as wise to make decisions without consulting anybody else because I don't have the experience, I don't have the knowledge. I hope I have good judgment, but maybe I don't have the wisdom, I don't have the experience and the knowledge, and so that's why we seek out and ask people for help. But a lot of times, we just follow our gut, and we do what we think is best, and we don't consult anyone else. You're probably familiar with Socrates, but he says this, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. On some level, Rehoboam knew this. Because when they came to him asking the question, he says, he didn't say, I don't know, but he basically said, go away, I need to figure this out. And then he asked for some help. He probably maybe had heard his dad at some point, being around Solomon, say these words from Proverbs chapter 28. Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. You cannot always trust your heart. You can't always trust your gut in every decision that you need to make. We need to combine it with what we've talked about already. So, let me wrap this up. Here's what I think. We find ourselves a lot of times in life needing to make a decision in all these different places that we can look. Online, people just feeling that we know the right decision to make. here's going to be my recommendation for you. And you'll talk about this in your groups tonight. Do you have in your life 2 to 3 people that you really trust will look out for you? That if you need an answer for something, or you need guidance, or you need advice, do you have people to go to? And this needs to be like a variety of different types of people. Maybe one's a friend, maybe one's like your small group leader, or even your parents or an uncle or something like that. Do you have people that you can turn to and go to when you need an answer, you need guidance, you need help with something, and you will trust? Maybe they don't know the right answer, but they know where to go. They know how to help you process it and think through it. This is really practically what it comes down to. And here's how I'd phrase it in one sentence, like a bottom line. Making choices doesn't have to be hard, but it shouldn't be easy. And here's what I mean by that. Choices, the decisions that you make, they don't have to be hard. You don't have to go through some algorithm to know I've gone through every single thing to make sure I'm making the right choice. But it shouldn't be easy enough to go, well, this is just kind of how I feel. Because when you trust in yourself, or you trust some random person online, that's not the easy way to make it. It's the easy way to make a decision, but it's not always the wisest. I'm hoping tonight, from Rehoboam's story, you can recognize a couple of truths. You can recognize that decision-making is important, finding good counsel is important, and how we do that is really important. So what I'm going to challenge you to do as you go into your groups tonight, I know this is a different type of message, is to really think through your life, how you make decisions, where you find advice and counsel, specifically even online, because I know that's where a lot of us do this, and what step you could make to give yourself a filter to make sure you're finding that in the right place.